unique and lesser-known detail about Viking foraging is the use of birch sap. In early spring, Vikings would tap birch trees to collect their sap, a clear, slightly sweet liquid. This sap could be drunk fresh, providing hydration and a hint of natural sugar, or it could be boiled down to create a syrup, a rare source of concentrated sweetness. Imagine collecting the dripping sap from a birch tree, its delicate flavor a welcome sign of spring after a long, cold winter. It was a clever way to extract sustenance from the forest, a testament to their deep understanding of natural cycles. It's like their version of maple syrup, but from a different tree and with a much more subtle flavor. The knowledge of how to grow and store these hardy crops was passed down through generations, a vital part of Viking agricultural heritage. Children would learn from a young age how to prepare the soil, plant seeds, tend to the growing plants, and harvest them for storage. It was a practical education, essential for the survival of the community. You'd learn to respect the land and its bounty, understanding the effort required to put food on the table. You wake up, not in your cozy bed, but on a rough wool blanket in a dimly lit longhouse. The air is thick with the smell of wood smoke, damp earth, and something vaguely sour. Your stomach growls, and your first thought, naturally, is food. But forget your morning cereal and milk, because in the Viking Age, breakfast was often just a piece of hard bread, perhaps some dried meat, and a drink that might make your modern taste buds recoil. And at the very heart of almost every meal, every day, for almost everyone, were grains and fermented dairy. However, the precise yields of Viking cultivated crops and their overall contribution to the average Viking's caloric intake, especially compared to foraged foods and animal products, remains an open academic debate, while archaeological evidence points to the presence of these crops. Historians still debate the scale of cultivation and how consistently they could be relied upon given the challenging climate. Was farming a consistent provider, or did it often fall short, requiring heavy reliance on other sources? The exact balance between cultivated and wild foods, and the impact of crop failures, is still being carefully weighed by scholars, like trying to predict the harvest from a 1,000-year-old seed. You see, the Viking diet, much like the Roman diet we explored, was fundamentally a diet of necessity and practicality. The harsh northern climate and the demands of travel and warfare meant that food had to be hearty, calorie-dense, and easily preserved. And the most efficient way to achieve this was through the cultivation of resilient grains and the ingenious use of dairy products, especially those that had been fermented. So, as you envision your next Viking meal, remember that the garden, while humble, played a crucial role. It provided the hardy roots and greens that sustained communities through long winters, a testament to their resilience and their ability to coax sustenance from a challenging environment. You might find yourself appreciating the vast selection and year-round availability of your modern grocery store, a stark contrast to the limited, but vital, cultivated crops of the Viking Age. Imagine a world where your daily bread wasn't the soft, fluffy loaf you might pick up from a bakery. Oh no. Viking bread was a different beast entirely. It was dense, often flat, and frequently made from barley or rye, grains that thrived in the cooler, wetter climates of Scandinavia. This wasn't a delicate, airy bread. It was a sturdy, substantial sustenance, designed to fill you up and provide lasting energy for a day of farming, fishing, or perhaps even raiding. You'd eat it not for pleasure, but for pure, unadulterated survival. It was the kind of bread that could probably double as a weapon in a pinch. Having just explored the hardy, humble world of Viking, cultivated vegetables, your thoughts might now drift to the one element that truly provided warmth, energy, and a surprising amount of flavor in their often sparse diet fats. You picture a golden slab of butter, perhaps some rendered lard, or even something more exotic. For the Vikings, fats were not just a culinary component. They were a lifeline, a concentrated source of energy in a cold, demanding environment, derived from butter, lard, and, in a truly Viking fashion, blubber. Barley was the king of Viking grains. It was incredibly versatile, used not only for bread but also for porridge and brewing ale. Imagine a thick, hearty porridge, boiled with water or milk, perhaps with a few berries if you were lucky. This was grut, the Viking equivalent of oatmeal, but far less appealing to a modern palate. It was often unsweetened, its flavor earthy and robust. You'd slurp it down, feeling its warmth and knowing it provided the essential fuel for a demanding life. It was filling, much certainly, but about as exciting as watching a glacier melt. You stand in the smoky interior of the longhouse. The chill of the outside world kept at bay by the central hearth. A large pot simmers over the fire, and you notice a glistening sheen on the surface of the stew. It's not just water, it's a rich, oily layer, hinting at the presence of vital fats. This, my friend, is the Viking secret to survival, a diet rich in high-energy fats, derived from every available source and consumed with a pragmatic understanding of their life-sustaining power. Rye was another important grain, especially for making denser, darker breads. These breads were often leavened with sourdough starters, giving them a distinct tangy flavor. Imagine a dark, heavy loaf, its crust hard and its crumb dense, providing a satisfying chew. It was the kind of bread that could last for days, even weeks, on a long voyage, making it ideal for Viking expeditions. You'd break off a piece, its earthy aroma filling your nostrils, and chew slowly, feeling its substantial texture. It was a testament to their resourcefulness, turning humble grains into enduring provisions. In a climate where temperatures could plummet and physical exertion was a daily reality, calories were king. The most efficient way to get those calories was through fat. The Vikings, through their farming, hunting, and fishing, managed to acquire and utilize a remarkable array of fat sources, each playing a crucial role in their diet. The milling process, much like in Roman times, was rudimentary. Grains would be ground using hand querns, simple stone mills that required considerable effort. This meant that Viking flour, like Roman flour, often contained small fragments of stone, adding a gritty texture to their bread. So, with every bite, you weren't just getting carbohydrates, you were getting a microscopic dose of pulverized rock. It's no wonder Viking teeth, when found, often show significant wear and tear. It's like a built-in dental filing system, whether you wanted it or not. Butter was a staple, especially in communities that kept dairy animals, made from the cream of cow, sheep, or goat milk. Butter provided a concentrated source of energy and flavor. Imagine the rhythmic churning of milk in a wooden churn, slowly transforming liquid into a solid, golden mass. This butter, often unsalted or lightly salted, would be stored in wooden barrels or wrapped in cloth, sometimes even buried in bogs for long-term preservation, a practice that occasionally yields incredibly old, still edible bog butter today. You'd spread it thickly on your dense barley bread, its rich, creamy texture a delightful contrast to the chewy grain. It was more than just a spread. It was a vital source of warmth and sustenance, especially during the long, dark winters. Now let's talk about dairy, specifically fermented dairy. The Vikings kept cows, sheep, and goats, and their milk was a vital source of nutrition. But fresh milk, especially in a world without refrigeration, spoils quickly. So, the Vikings became masters of fermentation, transforming milk into more durable and often sour products. Lard, rendered from the fat of pigs, was another important fat source, particularly in areas where pigs were raised. While pork was less common in the coldest northern regions, where it was available, every part of the animal was utilized. Imagine large chunks of pig fat slowly melting over a gentle fire, the clear, liquid lard being collected and stored in earthenware pots or bladders. This rendered fat was incredibly versatile, used for cooking, frying, and adding richness to stews and porridges. It was also a crucial component for preserving meats, acting as a protective layer against spoilage. You'd use it to fry your fish, or to add a satisfying mouthfeel to a simple vegetable stew. It was a taste of pure energy, a pragmatic approach to maximizing the caloric yield from their livestock. Imagine a world where sour milk was not just acceptable, but preferred. Skyr, a thick, sour, yogurt-like product, was a staple in Iceland and parts of Scandinavia. It was made by fermenting skimmed milk, creating a protein-rich, tangy food that could be stored for extended periods. You'd eat it plain, or perhaps with a few berries if they were available. Its sharp taste a shock to your modern palate. It's like a super concentrated, unsweetened Greek yogurt, but with a history spanning over 1,000 years. But perhaps the most distinctive and, to a modern palate, the most surprising and gross source of fat for the Vikings came from marine mammals' blubber. for coastal communities and those involved in whaling or seal hunting. Blubber from whales, seals, and walruses was an indispensable part of their diet. Imagine the immense slabs of thick, oily blubber stripped from the carcass of a freshly caught whale or seal. This wasn't just a food, it was a treasure, providing an unparalleled source of concentrated energy. Butter was also churned from milk, providing essential fats and a way to preserve dairy. Imagine the rhythmic churning of milk in a wooden churn, slowly separating the rich butter fat. This butter, often unsalted or lightly salted, would be stored in wooden barrels or wrapped in cloth, providing a calorie-dense spread for bread or an ingredient for cooking. It was a precious commodity, a source of vital energy in a cold climate. Whale blubber in particular, that was a game changer. It could be eaten raw, dried, or rendered down into oil. Imagine biting into a piece of raw whale blubber, its texture firm yet yielding, its taste intensely oily and somewhat fishy. It was a taste of pure, unadulterated fat, designed to provide maximum warmth and energy in the coldest environments. It's the kind of food that would make you feel like you were truly living on the edge, a primal connection to the hunt. This blubber was often dried into strips, making it a portable and long-lasting energy snack for long voyages. It was the ultimate Viking energy bar, packed with calories and essential nutrients. Cheese, too, was made from milk, though Viking cheeses were likely harder, saltier, and more aged than many modern varieties. Designed for long-term storage. Imagine a hard, crumbly cheese, its flavor intense and savory, providing a concentrated source of protein and fat. It was a perfect companion for the dense barley bread, a simple yet satisfying meal for a Viking farmer or warrior. Seal blubber was also highly valued, often consumed raw or rendered. Seals were more accessible than whales for many coastal communities, providing a regular supply of this vital fat. Imagine a small community processing a seal catch, carefully separating the blubber, knowing that this precious resource would help them survive the harsh winter. It was a testament to their resourcefulness, utilizing every part of the animals they hunted. One common historical fact that often surprises people is the sheer ingenuity of Viking preservation methods. Particularly for dairy, they didn't just ferment milk. They understood the principles of lactic acid fermentation long before modern science articulated them. This knowledge allowed them to transform a highly perishable food into a stable, nutritious staple, crucial for survival during long winters or sea voyages. It was a testament to their practical intelligence, born out of necessity. One common historical fact that often goes unappreciated is the Viking use of animal fats in combination with other foods for preservation and enhanced nutrition. Berries, for instance, were sometimes mixed with rendered animal fat to create a calorie-dense, long-lasting paste. Imagine a mixture of sweet lingonberries and rich animal fat, pounded together to form a kind of ancient energy bar. This wasn't just about taste, it was about creating a highly efficient food source that could be stored and transported, providing vital energy during long journeys or periods of scarcity. It was a clever way to combine different food groups for maximum benefit. A unique and lesser-known detail is the Viking practice of making misa, a byproduct of cheese making. This was a sour, watery whey, often consumed as a drink or used in cooking. While it might sound unappetizing, misa was rich in nutrients and could be stored for a long time, making it a valuable source of hydration and sustenance. Imagine a thin, tangy liquid, a bit like very weak, sour milk, but incredibly refreshing after a day of hard labor. It was a zero-waste approach to dairy, ensuring every part of the milk was utilized. It's like their version of a sports drink, but with a much more rustic flavor profile. A unique and lesser-known detail about Viking fat consumption is the practice of consuming bone marrow. After an animal was butchered, the bones would often be cracked open to extract the rich, fatty marrow. This highly nutritious substance, packed with calories and essential fatty acids, would be eaten raw or added to stews. Imagine carefully cracking open a large bone, revealing the soft, creamy marrow within, a hidden delicacy. It was a testament to their nose-to-tail philosophy, ensuring that no part of a valuable animal went to waste. It's like their version of a gourmet spread, but one that required a hammer and a strong stomach. The importance of grains and fermented dairy cannot be overstated in the Viking diet. They provided the bulk of the calories and essential nutrients, forming the foundation upon which their entire society was built. Without these hardy staples, the Vikings could not have survived the harsh Scandinavian winters, nor could they have undertaken their epic voyages across the North Atlantic. They were the fuel that powered their longships and their conquests. Fish oils, particularly from oily fish like herring and cod, were also consumed, either directly or as part of the fish itself. While not always rendered separately, the fat content of these fish was a crucial part of the Viking diet, providing essential omega-3 fatty acids, vital for health in a diet that might otherwise lack them. Imagine the rich, oily taste of a piece of dried herring. Its fat content a silent contributor to your overall well-being. However, the precise nutritional adequacy of a diet so heavily reliant on grains and fermented dairy, especially during lean times, remains an open academic debate. While these foods provided calories and some nutrients, historians and archaeologists still debate whether the Viking diet was consistently balanced, or if periods of scarcity led to widespread nutritional deficiencies. Was it a robust diet that allowed them to thrive, or a bare minimum diet that merely allowed them to survive? The evidence from skeletal remains, while showing signs of hard lives, doesn't always provide a clear picture of daily nutritional intake. The importance of fat in the Viking diet cannot be overstated. It provided the necessary energy to withstand the cold climate, to endure physically demanding labor, and to power their longships across vast oceans. Without these concentrated sources of calories, their survival would have been far more precarious. They understood, instinctively, the vital role of fat in maintaining warmth and energy. It was their internal furnace, keeping them going when the world outside was frozen. So, as you drift deeper into the Viking Age, remember the taste of that dense barley bread and the tang of sour skyr. These were the flavors of survival, the taste of resilience, and the constant companions of every Viking man, woman, and child. They might not be the most appealing foods to your modern palate, but they were the bedrock of a civilization that changed the course of history. You might find yourself grateful for the convenience of your modern pantry, far removed from the gritty, sour reality of Viking sustenance. The methods of cooking also often involved fat. Meats would be roasted, allowing their natural fats to render and baste the flesh. Stews and porridges would have fat added to them, not just for flavor, but to increase their caloric density. Imagine a hearty stew, its surface shimmering with a layer of rendered fat, providing warmth and satisfaction with every spoonful. It was a cuisine built around maximizing energy, a pragmatic response to a challenging environment. Having just experienced the gritty reality of Viking grains and the tangy world of fermented dairy, your stomach might now be craving something more substantial, something with teeth. You picture a mighty Viking warrior tearing into a roasted leg of lamb, or perhaps a hunter bringing down a wild boar. And while meat was certainly a part of the Viking diet, the reality of their animal protein was often more complex, involving a mix of hunted game, farmed livestock, and a strong reliance on preservation that left the meat tough, but undeniably vital. However, the precise long-term health implications of a diet so heavily reliant on animal fats, particularly saturated fats, remains an open academic debate. While these fats provided essential energy for their active lifestyles, historians and medical researchers still debate whether the high consumption of certain types of fat contributed to specific health challenges or diseases among the Viking population. Was it a perfectly adapted diet for their environment? Or did it come with its own set of hidden health costs? The evidence from skeletal remains, while showing signs of hard lives, doesn't always provide a clear picture of the precise impact of their fat intake. You step out of the longhouse to the crisp Scandinavian air biting at your cheeks, and the sounds of farm animals drift from nearby pens. You see sheep grazing on the sparse hillsides, and perhaps a few hardy cows. But this isn't a modern farm with endless fields and plump, grain-fed animals. This is a landscape where every animal represents a significant investment of effort and resources, and every part of that animal is precious. So, as you consider the Viking diet, remember that fats were not just an afterthought. They were a central pillar of their survival. From the comforting richness of butter to the raw power of blubber, these high-energy sources allowed the Vikings to thrive in a harsh world. You might find yourself appreciating the convenience of modern cooking oils and the wider variety of fat sources available today. But you'd also gain a profound respect for the ingenious ways the Vikings utilized every drop of fat to fuel their incredible lives. Hey guys, tonight we're setting sail. Not on a longship to raid distant shores, but on a culinary voyage into the harsh, unforgiving world of the Vikings. Forget the horned helmets and the berserker rage for a moment. Instead, picture yourself in a smoky longhouse, the biting Scandinavian wind howling outside, and your stomach rumbling. What's on the menu? Well, it's probably not what you'd expect. And honestly, if you were transported back there for a single meal, you'd probably be begging for a modern-day pizza within minutes. You might not even survive the first course without a strong stomach. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Having just explored the vital, high-energy world of Viking fats, your throat might now be parched, longing for a refreshing drink. You might picture a cool glass of water, or perhaps a modern soft drink. But in the Viking Age, the world of liquids was a realm of fermentation, strength, and surprising practicality. For the Vikings, their drinks were a mix of mead, ale, and perhaps most surprisingly, sour milk. For the Vikings, meat was a valuable commodity, not always an everyday luxury for everyone, but certainly a crucial component of their diet when available. The types of meat consumed varied widely depending on geography, season, and social status. You've just finished a hearty, fat-rich meal in the longhouse. The warmth of the fire makes you thirsty. You look around for something to quench your thirst. You might see a large horn or a wooden cup being passed around, filled with a golden, slightly cloudy liquid, or perhaps a simpler vessel holding something white and tangy. This, my friend, is the Viking approach to beverages, a world dominated by fermented drinks, each serving a purpose beyond mere hydration. Farmed animals provided a steady, if not always abundant, supply of meat. Sheep and goats were common, providing not only meat but also wool, milk, and hides. Imagine a small, lean sheep, its meat tougher and gamier than modern lamb, roasted over an open fire. It would be a celebratory meal, perhaps after a successful harvest, or a return from a trading voyage. Cattle were also kept, primarily for milk, but also for their meat, especially older animals past their prime for dairy or draft work. Pork was less common in the colder northern regions than in warmer Europe, but pigs were certainly raised where conditions allowed, providing fatty, calorie-rich meat. Water, of course, it was consumed, drawn from springs, rivers, or wells. However, unlike many ancient societies, the Vikings likely preferred fermented drinks when possible, as the alcohol content or the fermentation process itself helped to purify the liquid, making it safer than potentially contaminated fresh water. Imagine the simple act of drinking water, always with a slight underlying caution, knowing that an unseen illness could lurk within. So, while water was available, it wasn't always the first choice for daily consumption, especially in settled areas where sanitation could be an issue. The methods of cooking meat were often simple and robust. Boiling in large cauldrons over the central hearth of the longhouse was common, creating hearty stews that could feed many. Imagine chunks of meat, perhaps mutton or beef, simmering for hours with root vegetables and grains, the rich aroma filling the smoky interior of the longhouse. This slow cooking would tenderize even the toughest cuts, making them palatable. Roasting over an open fire was also practiced, especially for larger pieces of meat, creating a smoky, charred exterior and a flavorful interior. Mead, the legendary drink of the gods, was a truly iconic Viking beverage, made from fermented honey and water, sometimes with added spices or fruits. Mead was a sweet, potent, and highly prized drink, often reserved for feasts, celebrations, and religious rituals. Imagine a golden liquid, its sweetness balanced by the tang of fermentation, served in an ornate drinking horn. It was a symbol of hospitality, a drink of warriors and poets, believed to inspire courage and wisdom. You'd sip it slowly, feeling its warmth spread through you, a taste of Viking luxury and tradition. It's like their champagne, but with a much more ancient and mystical aura, Hunting and trapping provided a crucial supplement to farmed meat, especially for those living near forests or wilderness areas. Deer, elk, wild boar, and various birds like grouse and geese were hunted. Imagine tracking a deer through a snow-covered forest. The silence broken only by the crunch of your boots on the frozen ground. The meat from these wild animals would have been lean, intensely flavored, and required skill and effort to acquire. It was a taste of the wild, a connection to the untamed landscapes they inhabited. Ale was the everyday drink, the Viking equivalent of beer, made from fermented barley or other grains. Ale was less potent than mead, but far more common. It was brewed in almost every household, a staple part of the daily diet for men, women, and even children, though children would consume weaker versions. Imagine a thick, cloudy ale, its taste earthy and robust, often with a slightly sour tang due to the wild yeasts used in fermentation. It was a source of calories, hydration, and perhaps a mild buzz after a long day of labor. You'd drink it with every meal, knowing it provided essential energy and helped wash down the often tough food. It was their daily bread, in liquid form. But perhaps the most surprising, and to a modern palate, grossest forms of meat came from marine mammals. Whales, seals, and walruses were hunted, particularly in coastal and Arctic regions. These animals provided not only vast quantities of meat, but also blubber, a vital source of fat in a diet that could otherwise be lean. Imagine the immense effort involved in hunting a whale from a small longship, a dangerous and communal undertaking. The resulting bounty, though, would sustain an entire community for weeks or months. Whale meat, often described as tasting like a strong, oily beef, would be dried, smoked, or salted for preservation. Seal meat, too, was a staple, its dark, rich flesh providing essential nutrients. It's the kind of meat that would make you question your life choices, but for the Vikings, it was pure, unadulterated survival fuel. The brewing process for ale was simple but effective. Grains would be malted, allowed to sprout, and then dried, then mashed with hot water to convert starches into sugars. This sweet liquid, called wort, would then be fermented with wild yeasts, which were often just present in the air or on the brewing equipment. The resulting ale would be unfiltered and consumed relatively quickly, as it didn't keep for long without modern preservation methods. Imagine the earthy smell of brewing ale permeating the longhouse, a comforting aroma that signaled sustenance. One common historical fact that highlights the Viking approach to meat is their extensive use of drying and smoking for preservation. In a climate where salting agents like salt itself could be scarce or expensive, air drying and smoking were crucial. Imagine long strips of meat, perhaps beef or whale, hanging from racks in the open air, exposed to the cold, dry winds of Scandinavia. This process, known as skirping, would slowly desiccate the meat, making it incredibly tough and durable, but also perfectly preserved for long voyages or the harsh winter months. It was a low-tech, high-impact method that allowed them to store meat for extended periods without spoilage. Now, let's talk about sour milk. While fresh milk was consumed by children and used for butter and cheese, the Vikings also drank various forms of fermented milk. Skyr, which we discussed earlier, was a thick yogurt-like product, but thinner. Sour milk drinks were also common. These fermented milk products were safer to store and consume than fresh milk, especially in warmer weather, and provided valuable probiotics and nutrients. Imagine a tangy, slightly effervescent drink, its sourness a refreshing contrast to the richness of their diet. It's like their version of buttermilk or kefir, but perhaps even more rustic. A unique and lesser-known detail about Viking meat consumption is the practice of eating various internal organs and blood. Nothing was wasted. Liver, kidneys, heart, and even lungs were consumed, often boiled into stews or made into sausages. Blood was also collected and used, sometimes mixed with flour to make blood bread or blood pudding. Imagine a rich, dark sausage, dense with blood and spices, a truly ancient form of nose-to-tail eating. This wasn't just about avoiding waste, it was about maximizing nutrition. Organs are often incredibly nutrient-dense, providing vitamins and minerals that might be scarce in other parts of the diet. It's like their version of a superfood, but one that would make most modern diners faint. Whey, the byproduct of cheese making, was also consumed as a drink. This thin, watery liquid, known as mysa, was sour but nutritious. Often drunk plain or used as a base for other beverages. Imagine a clear, yellowish liquid. Its tartness a shock to your modern palate. But its hydrating and nourishing qualities undeniable. It was a testament to their zero-waste philosophy, ensuring every drop from their dairy animals was utilized. It's like their version of a sports drink, but with a much more natural flavor. The quality of meat could vary greatly. Without modern veterinary science, diseases in livestock were common, and the handling of meat was often rudimentary. The risk of parasites and bacteria was ever present. This meant that strong flavors from herbs, spices, and fermentation were often used not just for taste, but also to mask less than ideal conditions, or to aid in digestion. Imagine eating a piece of meat, knowing its provenance was questionable, but trusting that the cooking process and accompanying flavors would make it safe enough. It was a constant gamble, a test of your stomach's fortitude. One common historical fact that highlights the Viking approach to drinks is the role of communal drinking in their social rituals. Feasts and gatherings were occasions for copious consumption of mead and ale, often accompanied by storytelling, poetry recitation, and boasts of valor. Imagine a large gathering in the chieftain's hall, horns of mead being passed around, laughter and boisterous conversation filling the air. Drinking was a central part of their social fabric, fostering camaraderie and reinforcing social bonds. It was a time for celebration, for making alliances, and for forgetting the harsh realities of daily life, if only for a few hours. For Viking warriors on longships, meat rations would be primarily dried or smoked. Fresh meat was a rare luxury, consumed only when a successful hunt or raid provided it. Imagine a group of warriors huddled around a small fire on a desolate shore, sharing a piece of tough, dried meat, its salty, smoky flavor a welcome change from the monotonous hardtack. It was the fuel that powered their incredible journeys, allowing them to explore, trade, and raid across vast distances. A unique and lesser-known detail about Viking beverages is the occasional addition of various herbs, spices, and even tree resins to their mead and ale. While not as common as simple fermentation, some archaeological evidence suggests the use of bog myrtle, yarrow, juniper berries, and even birch resin to flavor and preserve their drinks. Imagine sipping an ale with a subtle, earthy bitterness from bog myrtle, or a mead with a hint of piney freshness from juniper. These additions not only enhanced the flavor, but also sometimes had mild psychoactive properties, or acted as preservatives. It's like their version of craft brewing, but with ingredients sourced directly from the wild. The social hierarchy also played a role in meat consumption. While everyone consumed some form of meat, the wealthy had access to more frequent and higher quality cuts, as well as exotic game. Feasts in the longhouse of a chieftain would feature larger quantities of roasted meat, perhaps even a whole boar, a display of wealth and generosity. But even these feasts would emphasize hearty, substantial fare, rather than delicate culinary creations. It was about abundance and strength, not finesse. The strength of Viking alcoholic beverages varied. While some mead could be quite potent, everyday ale was likely lower in alcohol content than many modern beers, designed for regular consumption rather than extreme intoxication. It was a source of calories and hydration, and the mild alcohol content might have had a slight calming effect after a long day. However, during feasts, the goal was often to drink to excess, a sign of strength and hospitality. However, the precise proportion of meat in the average Viking diet, and how it varied between different regions and social classes, remains an open academic debate. While archaeological finds and written accounts provide clues, historians still debate the extent to which hunting supplemented farming, and how frequently meat was consumed by the common person versus the elite. Was it a regular part of everyone's diet, or a rare treat for most? The answers are still being pieced together from bone fragments in ancient texts, like trying to reconstruct a feast from scattered crumbs. The storage of these drinks was also a challenge. Mead and ale would be kept in wooden barrels, earthenware pots, or leather skins. Without modern bottling techniques, they would slowly lose their potency or turn sour over time. So they were often consumed relatively fresh, or within a few months of brewing. Imagine the constant cycle of brewing and drinking. ensuring a steady supply of these vital liquids. So, as you envision your next Viking meal, don't expect a tender steak or a perfectly roasted chicken. Instead, prepare for something tougher, saltier, smokier, and perhaps a little more adventurous. Meat in the Viking Age was a testament to their resilience, their resourcefulness, and their willingness to eat almost anything that provided vital calories and nutrients in a challenging environment. You might find yourself missing the subtle flavors of a well-prepared modern dish, but then again, you'd probably just be grateful it wasn't another piece of dried whale blubber. The social hierarchy also influenced what you drank. While ale was for everyone, finer mead and imported wines, though rare and expensive, would be reserved for the wealthy elite in special occasions. Imagine a chieftain offering a rare, aged mead to an honored guest, a gesture of immense respect and hospitality. It was a liquid symbol of status, a taste of luxury in a world where most drinks were purely functional. Having just wrestled with the tough reality of Viking meats, from lean sheep to oily whale blubber, your palate might be craving something from the vast, cold waters that defined so much of the Viking world. You picture a bountiful catch, glistening fish hauled from the sea, perhaps grilled simply over a roaring fire. And while fish was indeed abundant for the Vikings, the reality of their seafood was often a far cry from a fresh fillet. It was pervasive, yes, but often consumed dried, heavily salted, and with a distinct, lingering aroma that would make a modern fishmonger faint. However, the precise impact of consistent alcohol consumption on the overall health and social behavior of the Viking population remains an open academic debate. While alcohol provided calories and a sense of well-being, excessive consumption could have led to health issues and social problems. Historians and archaeologists are still examining skeletal remains for signs of alcohol-related diseases and analyzing sagas for clues about the social consequences of heavy drinking. Was it a harmless part of their culture, or did it contribute to violence and other societal ills? The answers are still being fermented, much like their ancient brews. You stand on the rocky coastline, the frigid North Sea wind whipping at your hair, carrying the unmistakable scent of salt and something powerfully fishy. Small and sturdy boats are returning from their fishing trips, their hulls laden with the day's bounty. But this isn't a modern dock with ice-packed crates and swift transport. This is a place where fish, once caught, begins its rapid journey towards preservation, a race against time and decay. So, as you imagine the liquids that sustained the Vikings, remember that they were far more than just thirst quenchers. They were sources of energy, tools for preservation, and integral parts of their social and spiritual lives. From the golden sweetness of mead to the earthy tang of ale and the surprising tartness of sour milk, these drinks were a testament to their ingenuity and their ability to thrive in a challenging environment. You might find yourself appreciating the wide array of modern beverages, but you'd also gain a profound respect for the resourceful ways the Vikings quenched their thirst and fueled their incredible lives. Fish was, without a doubt, the single most important food source for many Vikings, especially those living in coastal areas or on islands like Iceland and Greenland. The cold, nutrient-rich waters of the North Atlantic teemed with cod, herring, haddock, and various other species. For many, fish provided the primary source of protein and fat, far more consistently than meat from farmed animals or hunted game. It was the bedrock of their diet, the fuel that powered their incredible seafaring culture. Having just explored the potent world of Viking beverages, from the celebratory mead to the everyday ale and the surprisingly refreshing sour milk, your mind might now turn to the heart of their culinary world, how they actually prepared their food. Forget gleaming stainless steel kitchens, precise measurements, or intricate culinary techniques. Viking cooking was a realm of hearth, pot, and simplicity, where necessity was the mother of invention, and every meal was a testament to their resourcefulness. Imagine a typical Viking meal. Even if it wasn't the main course, fish, or at least its essence, was likely present in some form. Small. Common fish might be boiled into a thick stew with grains and root vegetables, their delicate flesh dissolving into a nourishing broth. Or perhaps they were simply grilled over an open fire, their scales still attached, their eyes staring blankly as you picked at the meager meat. It was a practical food, providing essential nutrients, but often requiring a certain tolerance for bones and a strong stomach for the smell. You stand in the center of the longhouse, the central hearth blazing, its smoke rising through the smoke hole in the roof. The air is warm, filled with the comforting smell of burning wood and simmering food. A large iron cauldron hangs over the flames, bubbling gently and nearby. A flat stone rests in the embers. This, my friend, is the Viking kitchen, a communal space where food was prepared with basic tools and a deep understanding of fire and time. The sheer abundance of certain fish, particularly cod and herring, allowed the Vikings to develop sophisticated, albeit simple, methods of preservation. Without refrigeration, they relied heavily on drying and salting to extend the life of their catch, transforming highly perishable food into durable, transportable provisions. Drying was perhaps the most iconic Viking preservation method for fish. Imagine vast quantities of cod, gutted and beheaded, then hung on wooden racks to dry in the cold. Windy air. This process, known as stockfish, or torfisk in Norwegian, would slowly desiccate the fish, removing almost all its moisture content. The result was an incredibly tough, rigid piece of fish, resembling a wooden club more than a food item. But this stockfish was virtually indestructible and could be stored for years on and was incredibly lightweight, making it ideal for long sea voyages and trade. You'd need to rehydrate it for days, sometimes even a week, by soaking it in water or lye, before it became remotely edible. Even then, it would be chewy, intensely flavored, and require considerable effort to consume. It's like eating a very, very chewy piece of jerky, but made of fish, and with a distinctly fishy aroma that never quite leaves your nostrils. Salting was another crucial method, especially for herring. Imagine massive quantities of herring, layered with coarse salt in large wooden barrels. The salt would draw out the moisture and prevent spoilage, creating a highly concentrated, savory product. Salted herring was a staple throughout the Viking world, providing a dense source of protein and fat, especially during the long winters when fresh food was scarce. You'd pull a piece of heavily salted herring from a barrel, its briny aroma assaulting your senses, and know that this was the taste of survival. It was a bit like eating a very concentrated, salty fish paste, but in whole fish form. Boiling was arguably the most common and efficient cooking method. Large iron or soapstone cauldrons, often suspended over the fire by chains, were used to prepare stews, porridges, and boiled meats and fish. Imagine a thick, hearty stew simmering for hours, its ingredients slowly tenderizing and their flavors melding together. This method was ideal for tough cuts of meat, dried fish, and hearty root vegetables, breaking down fibers and making them more digestible. It also allowed for communal cooking, feeding many people from a single pot. You'd ladle out a steaming bowl, its warmth a welcome comfort in the cold climate, its contents a nourishing blend of whatever was available. It was the ultimate one-pot meal, a testament to their pragmatic approach to feeding a household. The taste of these preserved fish products would have been a shock to a modern palate. Stockfish, even after rehydration, retained a strong, almost ammoniacal odor and a chewy texture. Salted herring was intensely briny, often requiring further soaking or dilution before consumption. These were not delicate flavors, they were bold, assertive, and unmistakably fishy, designed to provide maximum calories and nutrients in a challenging environment. It's the kind of food that makes you appreciate the subtle nuances of a modern fish stick. Roasting was also practiced, especially for larger pieces of meat or whole animals. Imagine a wild boar or a leg of lamb slowly turning on a spit over an open flame, its fat dripping into the fire, creating a smoky aroma that would make your mouth water. This method was often reserved for feasts and special occasions, as it required more fuel and attention. The meat would develop a smoky, charred exterior and a tender, flavorful interior. You'd carve off a piece, its warmth radiating, its taste a rich reward for the hunt or the harvest. It was a primal form of cooking, connecting them directly to the bounty of the land. One common historical fact that highlights the economic importance of fish is the role of stockfish in Viking trade. Stockfish was a major export commodity, traded across Europe, reaching markets as far south as the Mediterranean. The Vikings weren't just raiders, they were also shrewd merchants, and stockfish was one of their most valuable goods. Imagine a longship returning from a voyage, not just with plunder, but with holds full of dried fish, ready to be traded for silver and furs or other exotic goods. It was the protein currency of the north, a testament to their ability to turn a natural resource into economic power. Baking, particularly for bread, was done on flat stones heated in the embers of the fire, or sometimes in simple earth ovens. Imagine a flat, dense barley or rye bread placed directly on a hot stone, slowly baking in the residual heat of the hearth. These breads were often unleavened or made with sourdough starters, giving them a robust texture and a tangy flavor. It was a simple, effective way to turn grain into a portable and long-lasting food source. You'd break off a piece, its crust hard and its crumb dense, a satisfying chew that provided lasting energy. A unique and lesser-known detail about Viking fish consumption is the practice of making hakarl, or fermented shark. This particularly pungent delicacy, still consumed in Iceland today, involves burying a Greenland shark, which is poisonous if eaten fresh due to high levels of urea and trimethylamine oxide in a shallow pit, pressing it with stones, and allowing it to ferment for several months. After this initial fermentation, it's dug up and hung to dry for several more months. The result is an incredibly strong-smelling, ammonia-rich, and chewy piece of shark meat. Imagine biting into something that tastes like a very strong cheese mixed with cleaning fluid. And you're probably getting close. It's the kind of food that requires a true Viking spirit to consume. A culinary challenge that makes surströmming look like a mild appetizer. Frying was less common due to the limited availability of cooking fats. But when fats like lard or rendered blubber were available, they would be used to fry smaller pieces of meat or fish. Imagine small pieces of fish sizzling in a pan over the fire, their edges crisping in the hot fat. It was a quick way to cook, adding a desirable texture and flavor. However, given the value of fats, this was likely a less frequent method than boiling. The preparation of fish was often simple, focusing on boiling, grilling, or frying. Elaborate sauces were less common, as the natural flavors of the fish, especially the preserved varieties, were often strong enough, or the fish was so heavily salted that it needed little else. Imagine a small fish, simply grilled over charcoal, its skin slightly charred, its flesh flaky. It was a basic, honest way of cooking, reflecting the practical nature of Viking cuisine. Preservation methods, which we've discussed, were integral to their cooking. Dried fish and meat needed to be rehydrated, often by soaking for days before they could be boiled or stewed. Salted foods required careful rinsing to reduce their intense brininess. This meant that the cooking process often began long before the food even touched the fire, a testament to the foresight and planning required for Viking sustenance. For Viking warriors on longships, dried fish was an indispensable part of their rations. It provided a lightweight, non-perishable source of protein that could endure long voyages across treacherous seas. Imagine a group of warriors huddled on the deck of a longship, the waves crashing around them, gnawing on a piece of rock-hard stockfish, its salty flavor a constant companion during their epic journeys. It was the fuel that powered their incredible explorations and conquests, allowing them to venture far from their homelands. One common historical fact that highlights the communal nature of Viking cooking is the longhouse itself. The central hearth was not just for one family, but often for an extended family or even a small community. Meals were prepared and eaten together, fostering a strong sense of community and shared responsibility. Imagine the sounds of chopping, stirring, and conversation mingling with the crackle of the fire, as everyone contributed to the preparation and enjoyment of the meal. It was a social event, a daily ritual that reinforced their bonds. The social hierarchy also played a role in fish consumption, though perhaps less pronounced than with meat. While everyone consumed fish, the wealthy might have access to larger, rarer species, or fish that were freshly caught and consumed immediately. They might also have more refined preparations, perhaps with more herbs or spices if available. But even for the elite, the fundamental reliance on dried and salted fish remained, especially during the long winters. A unique and lesser-known detail about Viking cooking is the use of hot stones for cooking, and even for heating water. Beyond baking bread, hot stones could be placed directly into liquid-filled containers like wooden buckets or leather bags to bring water to a boil, a method known as stone boiling. Imagine carefully transferring glowing hot stones from the fire into a bucket of water, watching as the water immediately begins to bubble and steam. This was a clever way to boil water or cook stews without needing fireproof vessels, especially useful when traveling or in temporary camps. It's like their version of an immersion heater, but with a lot more manual labor and a risk of burning your fingers. However, the precise impact of a diet so heavily reliant on dried and salted fish, particularly concerning nutrient deficiencies or the effects of high sodium intake, remains an open academic debate. While fish provided essential proteins and fats, the rigorous preservation methods could have reduced the bioavailability of certain vitamins, and the sheer amount of salt consumed could have contributed to health issues like hypertension. Historians and bioarchaeologists are still examining skeletal remains and ancient texts to understand the long-term health consequences of such a diet. Trying to determine if the benefits of abundant protein outweighed the potential drawbacks of the preservation process? It's a fascinating question, pondering whether their love for stockfish might have contributed to other ailments. The Viking diet, while seemingly simple, was surprisingly varied in its ingredients. Thanks to a combination of farming, hunting, fishing, and foraging, their cooking methods, however, remained largely uncomplicated, focusing on getting the most out of their ingredients with the tools at hand. They didn't have elaborate spice routes like the Romans, so their flavors were often derived from local herbs, wild garlic, and the natural richness of their meats and fish. So, as you contemplate your next Viking meal, remember that fish, in all its abundant, dried, and salty forms, was a constant presence. From the everyday stockfish that fueled their voyages to the challenging hockarl that tested their fortitude, seafood permeated every aspect of the Viking diet. It was a source of life, a tool for trade, and often a test of your culinary bravery. You might find yourself longing for the clean, fresh taste of a modern seafood dish. Far removed from the briny, sometimes putrid reality of the Viking Age, the concept of a recipe as we know it, with precise measurements and detailed instructions, was largely absent. Cooking was an art passed down through generations, learned through observation and practice. Imagine a young Viking learning to cook by watching their mother or grandmother, absorbing the techniques through repetition and intuition. It was a hands-on, experiential form of culinary education, where success was measured by a full belly and a healthy family. Having just navigated the incredibly salty and chewy world of Viking fish, your palate might be longing for something fresh, something green, something that doesn't require days of rehydration or an iron stomach. You dream of crisp salads, vibrant vegetables, or perhaps a handful of sweet berries. And while the Vikings certainly didn't have modern supermarkets, their survival often depended on a deep, intimate knowledge of the wild landscape around them. A world teeming with surprising and vital edible plants. The daily rhythm of Viking life revolved around these simple meals. Breakfast would be a quick affair, perhaps some bread and dried meat. The main meal, often in the late afternoon or early evening, would be the most substantial, a hearty stew or a roasted piece of meat, providing sustenance for the long, cold nights. There were no elaborate dining schedules or multiple courses for the average person. It was about efficiency and survival. You step out of the longhouse, not towards a cultivated field, but towards the edge of a dense forest or perhaps a windswept moor. The air is cool and damp, carrying the scent of pine needles, damp earth, and blooming wildflowers. Your eyes, accustomed to the subtle signs of nature, scan the ground, looking for familiar shapes, for the promise of sustenance. This, my friend, is the Viking art of foraging a constant search for the seasonal bounty of nature, a crucial supplement to their farmed and preserved foods. However, the precise impact of their cooking methods on nutrient retention and overall food safety remains an open academic debate. While boiling could reduce some vitamin content, it also made tough foods digestible and killed many pathogens. Roasting, while flavorful, could sometimes lead to charred exteriors and undercooked interiors. Historians and food scientists are still analyzing ancient food remains and culinary texts to understand the full nutritional consequences of their cooking techniques, weighing the benefits of digestibility against potential nutrient loss. Was their simple cooking optimal for their survival? Or did it inadvertently contribute to certain deficiencies? The answers are still simmering in the academic pot. Foraging was not just a hobby for the Vikings, it was a fundamental aspect of their survival, especially during the lean months or in regions where agriculture was challenging. While they cultivated some grains and hardy root vegetables, the wild provided a diverse array of greens, berries, mushrooms, and even tree products that offered essential vitamins. minerals, and flavors often missing from their staple diet. It was like having a vast, free grocery store if you knew where to look and what to pick. So, as you imagine the crackle of the Viking hearth and the aroma of a simmering stew, remember that their cooking was a reflection of their lives, practical, resourceful, and deeply connected to the land and sea. From the humble boiled porridge to the grand roasted feast, every meal was a testament to their ability to survive and thrive in a challenging world. You might find yourself appreciating the convenience and precision of your modern kitchen, but you'd also gain a profound respect for the simple, yet effective ways the Vikings put food on their table. Imagine walking through a sun-dappled forest in late summer. Your eyes are peeled for wild berries, blueberries, lingonberries, cloudberries, and cranberries. These tiny bursts of sweetness and tartness would have been incredibly valuable, providing much-needed vitamins and a delightful change from the savory and salty flavors of their everyday meals. You'd carefully pick them, staining your fingers purple and red, knowing that each berry was a small treasure. These berries would be eaten fresh or dried, or even mixed with animal fat for long-term preservation, creating a kind of ancient energy bar. It's the closest they got to a fruit snack, but one you had to work for. Having just explored the simple yet effective cooking methods of the Vikings, from the central hearth to the stone boiling, your mind might now turn from the daily grind of sustenance to the grander occasions. You picture a roaring fire, the clatter of drinking horns, and the boisterous laughter of a gathering. For the Vikings, food was not just about survival. It was deeply intertwined with their social fabric, their religious beliefs, and their very concept of status. Their feasts and rituals were a powerful display of community, hierarchy, and sometimes even sacrifice. Beyond berries, various wild greens and herbs were gathered. Nettle, for instance, was a common find. While stinging to the touch, when boiled or cooked, nettle loses its sting and becomes a nutritious, spinach-like green. Imagine carefully harvesting nettle leaves, wearing thick gloves or using a piece of cloth, knowing that soon they would be transformed into a vital, if humble, addition to your stew. Wild garlic, sorrel, and various types of cress would also be sought out, providing sharp, fresh flavors that could enliven even the blandest porridge. These greens were not just for flavor, they were packed with vitamins that prevented diseases like scurvy, a constant threat during long winters. You receive an invitation, perhaps from a local chieftain or a powerful landowner, to assemble a formal Viking feast. As you approach the longhouse, the sounds of music, storytelling, and the seagull clatter of many voices fill the cold air. The smoke from the central hearth billows from the roof, carrying the rich aroma of roasted meat and simmering ale. This, my friend, is where the Vikings truly celebrated, where food became a symbol of power, generosity, and communal identity. Root vegetables and tubers found in the wild also played a role. While not as abundant as cultivated ones, wild parsnips or certain edible roots could be dug up, providing starchy calories. Imagine the effort of digging through hard, rocky soil with a simple digging stick, searching for a hidden root, a small reward for your labor. It was a testament to their deep connection with the land, understanding its hidden edible treasures. You step inside, and the warmth of the longhouse envelops you. The central hearth casts dancing shadows on the timber walls, illuminating the faces of dozens of people gathered for the occasion. Long wooden tables are set up, laden with food, and benches line the walls. Unlike the Roman reclining, here you sit upright, shoulder to shoulder with your fellow Vikings, ready to partake in the communal bounty. This upright posture reflects their active, engaged approach to life, even during celebration. It's like a very intense potluck, but with more axes leaning in the corner. Mushrooms, too, would have been gathered, though this required expert knowledge to distinguish edible varieties from poisonous ones. Imagine a Viking foraging expert, carefully examining a mushroom, knowing that a single mistake could be fatal. Mushrooms would be added to stews or dried for later use, providing an earthy, umami flavor. It was a risky business, but the rewards could be substantial, adding depth and variety to their meals. The feast begins, not with delicate appetizers, but with substantial, hearty fare. Platters piled high with roasted meats, perhaps a whole boar, or large cuts of beef or mutton, are brought forth. Imagine the sight of a glistening, roasted animal, its skin crackling, its rich aroma filling the air. This was a direct display of the host's wealth and their ability to provide for their community. Dried and smoked fish, often rehydrated and boiled, would also be abundant, alongside thick porridges made from grains and root vegetables. Every dish was designed to be filling, nourishing, and a testament to the hard work of the community. One common historical fact that underscores the importance of foraging is the Viking use of seaweed. In coastal areas, various types of seaweed were collected and consumed, providing minerals and vitamins. Dulse, for example, a red seaweed, was eaten fresh or dried and used as a snack or added to dishes. Imagine chewing on a piece of dried dulse. Its salty, slightly chewy texture and iodine-rich flavor, a taste of the ocean. It was a readily available resource, often overlooked today, but vital for coastal communities. The food was often served in large, communal dishes. You would eat with your hands, perhaps using a simple knife for cutting meat. There were no individual plates or elaborate cutlery. It was a shared experience, reinforcing the bonds between those gathered. Imagine tearing off a piece of roasted meat with your bare hands. Its warmth and flavor a direct connection to the animal that provided it. It was messy, certainly, but deeply satisfying. The central hearth was the undisputed heart of the Viking home, not just for warmth, but for all cooking. Imagine a large, open fire, constantly tended, its embers providing a consistent heat source. There were no separate ovens or stovetops as we know them. All cooking revolved around this single, versatile fire. You'd learn to manage the flames, to arrange the embers just so, to control the heat with an intuitive understanding that comes from daily practice. It's like their version of a multifunctional kitchen appliance, but one that required constant vigilance and a lot of smoke. Drinks flowed freely, primarily ale and mead. Large drinking horns, often elaborately carved, would be passed around, filled and refilled. The sumble was a highly ritualized drinking session, where toasts were made to the gods, to ancestors, to fallen heroes, and to the host. Each toast was a moment of communal affirmation, a shared expression of belief and loyalty. Imagine raising your horn, its contents a golden liquid, and shouting a hearty "Skål" with your fellow Vikings, the sound echoing through the longhouse. It was a powerful bonding experience, a way to forge alliances and strengthen community ties. It's like a very intense, ancient version of a corporate team-building exercise, but with more alcohol and less trust falls. Tree bark, particularly the inner bark of pine trees, was also consumed during times of extreme scarcity. While not a delicious food, it provided some calories and fiber. Imagine scraping the inner bark from a pine tree. Its bitter taste a stark reminder of desperate times. It was a last resort, a testament to their resilience in the face of famine. This practice highlights just how resourceful and sometimes desperate the Vikings could be to survive. One common historical fact that highlights the significance of Viking feasts is their role in political and social life. Feasts were not just about eating. They were crucial arenas for decision-making, dispute resolution, and the forging of alliances. Important announcements would be made, laws debated, and agreements sealed with shared meals and copious drinking. Imagine a chieftain using a feast to solidify his power, to impress visiting dignitaries, or to rally his warriors for an upcoming raid. Food and drink were powerful tools of diplomacy and governance, far more effective than any written treaty. The seasonality of foraging meant that the Viking diet fluctuated significantly throughout the year. Spring brought fresh greens and birch sap. Summer offered an abundance of berries and mushrooms. And autumn was a time for collecting nuts and preserving wild fruits. Winter, however, was the leanest period, when they relied almost entirely on preserved foods and what little could be stored from the harvest. Imagine the joy and relief when the first fresh green shoots appeared in spring, signaling an end to the long, monotonous winter diet. A unique and lesser-known detail about Viking feasting is the practice of consuming specific animal parts for ritualistic purposes or as a sign of respect. For example, just the heart of a brave animal or certain organs might be eaten by warriors to absorb its strength or courage. Or the head of a sacrificed animal might be displayed prominently. Imagine a warrior, after a successful hunt, partaking in the heart of a bear, believing it would transfer the animal's ferocity to him. It was a deeply symbolic act, blurring the lines between sustenance and spirituality. It's like their version of a power-up. but with a lot more chewing. The knowledge of edible plants was passed down through generations, a vital part of Viking cultural heritage. Children would learn from their elders which plants were safe to eat, where to find them, and how to prepare them. It was a practical education, essential for survival in their challenging environment. You'd learn to identify plants by sight, smell, and even touch, a skill that could mean the difference between life and death. The concept of sacrifice or blot was deeply interwoven with Viking feasting. Animals, and sometimes even humans. Though human sacrifice is a contentious academic debate, and less common than often portrayed, would be sacrificed to the gods to ensure good harvests, successful raids, or favorable weather. The meat from these sacrifices would then often be consumed as part of the feast, creating a direct connection between the divine and the mundane. Imagine participating in a ritual where an animal is offered to Odin, and then its meat is shared among the community. A tangible link to the spiritual world? It was a way to appease the gods, to seek their favor, and to reinforce the community's shared beliefs. However, the precise contribution of foraged foods to the overall Viking diet, especially for different social classes and regions, remains an open academic debate. While archaeological evidence shows the consumption of wild plants, and sagas mention foraging. Historians still debate how consistently and significantly these foods supplemented their farmed produce and animal products. Was foraging a daily necessity for everyone, or primarily a fallback during times of scarcity for the poor? The exact balance between cultivated and wild foods is still being carefully weighed by scholars, like trying to measure the exact yield of a 1,000-year-old berry patch. The social hierarchy was clearly visible at these feasts. The chieftain and his most trusted warriors or family members would sit in the most honored positions, closest to the fire and the best cuts of meat. The quality and quantity of food and drink would also reflect the host's status. A truly lavish feast, with rare meats, abundant mead, and skilled entertainers, would enhance the host's prestige and reputation. Imagine the subtle glances, the unspoken judgments, as guests assess the generosity and power of their host through the abundance of his table. So, as you wander through the ancient Scandinavian landscape, remember that the Vikings didn't just survive on tough meat and fermented dairy. They thrived, in part, because of their deep connection to the wild, their ability to identify and utilize the surprising bounty of nature, from sweet berries to nutritious nettles and even the vital sap of trees. Foraging provided essential sustenance and a taste of freshness in a world that was often harsh and unforgiving. You might find yourself looking at the plants around you with new eyes, wondering what hidden edible treasures they might hold. Storytelling and poetry, known as skaldic verse, were also central to Viking feasts. Skalds, professional poets, would recite epic sagas and praise poems, entertaining the guests and preserving the oral traditions of their people. Imagine sitting by the fire, a horn of ale in your hand, listening to a skald recount tales of gods and heroes, their words painting vivid pictures in your mind. It was a form of entertainment, but also a vital way to transmit knowledge, history, and cultural values. It was their version of a live podcast, but with more fire and less headphones. Having just explored the surprising bounty of wild foods that the Vikings foraged from their harsh landscapes, your mind might now turn to what they actually grew. You picture neat rows of vibrant vegetables, perhaps a thriving kitchen garden bursting with fresh produce. But just as with their other food sources, the reality of Viking cultivated vegetables was often one of hardy resilience, limited variety, and a focus on practicality over culinary delight. The duration of these feasts could be extensive, sometimes lasting for days, especially during major festivals like Yule. They were periods of intense social interaction, communal bonding, and often significant consumption. Imagine spending several days in a longhouse, constantly eating, drinking, and socializing, the boundaries between day and night blurring in a haze of merriment and camaraderie. It was a welcome respite from the harsh realities of daily life, a time for celebration and renewal. You stand in a small, fenced-off enclosure near the longhouse, what might be considered a Viking garden. The soil looks rocky and unforgiving, and the plants growing within are sturdy, low to the ground, and decidedly unglamorous. There are no delicate lettuces or plump tomatoes here. Instead, you see the tough, leafy greens of cabbage, the humble tops of turnips, and perhaps some leeks pushing through the soil. This, my friend, is the Viking approach to cultivated vegetables, a focus on what could survive the challenging climate and provide essential sustenance. However, the precise extent and nature of human sacrifice in Viking rituals, particularly in relation to feasts, remains an open academic debate. While some historical accounts and archaeological finds suggest its occurrence, historians still debate its frequency, purpose, and whether it was a widespread practice or isolated incidents. Was it a common, integral part of their religious life, or a rare, extreme act? The evidence is often ambiguous, and scholars continue to scrutinize the sagas and archaeological records to understand this dark aspect of Viking culture. The primary challenge for Viking agriculture was the climate itself. Short growing seasons, cold temperatures, and often poor soil meant that only the hardiest of crops could thrive. This naturally limited the range of vegetables they could cultivate, pushing them towards robust root vegetables and hardy greens that could withstand the conditions. So, as you imagine the sounds and smells of a Viking feast, remember that it was far more than just a meal. It was a powerful social ritual, a display of status, a connection to the divine, and a vital part of their communal identity. From the shared meat to the flowing mead and the resonant toasts, every aspect of the feast reinforced their bonds and their place in the world. You might find yourself appreciating the quiet simplicity of your own modern dinner party, but you'd also gain a profound respect for the complex, vibrant, and sometimes brutal social world of the Vikings. Cabbage, much like in Roman times, was a Viking superstar. It was incredibly resilient, could be grown in various conditions, and provided valuable vitamins, especially during the long, dark winters. Imagine rows of tough, dark green cabbage plants, their leaves often crinkled and robust. These weren't the tender, sweet cabbages you might find in a modern supermarket. They were fibrous, often bitter, and designed for long cooking times in stews and porridges. You'd boil them for hours, until they were soft and somewhat bland, their strong sulfuric aroma filling the longhouse. It was the kind of vegetable that you ate because it was good for you, not because you craved its delicate flavor. Having journeyed through the gritty grains, the tough meats, the abundant yet often unappetizing fish, the surprising bounty of foraged foods, the hardy cultivated vegetables, the essential fats, the potent drinks, and the communal cooking and feasting rituals of the Vikings. You now stand at the culmination of our culinary exploration. It's time to reflect on the unyielding diet of survival that defined the Viking Age, a reality far removed from modern comforts and expectations. Turnips and similar root vegetables like rutabagas, though rutabagas might have been a later introduction, were also fundamental. These underground treasures were incredibly valuable for their ability to store carbohydrates and vitamins throughout the winter. Imagine digging up a gnarled, earthy turnip from the cold ground, its pale flesh promising sustenance. These roots would be boiled, roasted in the embers of the fire, or added to stews, providing a starchy, earthy component to meals. They were the unsung heroes of the Viking diet, quietly sustaining communities through the leanest months. Their natural sweetness, when cooked, would have been a welcome contrast to the prevailing savory and salty flavors. You've tasted the dense barley bread, felt the chewiness of dried meat, and perhaps even imagined the pungent tang of haycarl. You've smelled the wood smoke of the longhouse, the briny scent of stockfish, and the earthy aroma of brewing ale. You've sat at feasts of abundance and understood the daily struggle for basic sustenance. And as you look back, you realize that for all their seafaring prowess and warrior spirit, the Vikings lived in a world where food was a constant challenge, a testament to their resilience, and frequently, quite surprising, if not outright gross. By modern standards, leeks and onions were also cultivated, providing pungent flavors that could enliven otherwise bland dishes. Imagine the sharp, almost biting aroma of freshly chopped leeks added to a simmering pot of stew. These alliums were not just for taste, they also had believed medicinal properties and could be stored for a reasonable period. They were a culinary workhorse, adding depth and zest to almost any meal, making even the most basic porridge a little more interesting. The Viking diet, at its core, was a diet of sheer necessity and remarkable adaptability. It was designed to fuel an exploration, a conquest, and a survival against the harsh realities of the northern climate. It was not, for the most part, about culinary refinement or delicate flavors. The emphasis was on calories, on preservation, and on making the absolute most of every available resource, no matter how unconventional. This meant a heavy reliance on staple grains, hearty vegetables, and a pragmatic approach to animal products that left absolutely nothing to waste. Beyond these mainstays, the variety of cultivated vegetables was relatively limited. While some herbs like dill, parsley, and coriander might have been grown in small garden plots for culinary and medicinal purposes, large-scale vegetable farming as we know it was not common. The focus was on calorie-dense staples that could withstand the climate and provide maximum yield for the effort invested. Imagine the sheer physical effort involved in acquiring and preparing food. Cultivating crops in rocky soil, fishing in treacherous waters, hunting dangerous game, and meticulously preserving every scrap through drying, salting, and fermenting. Every meal was a direct result of relentless labor and ingenious problem solving. There were no convenience stores, no global supply chains, no instant solutions. You ate what you could produce, what you could catch, or what you could trade for, always with an eye towards the long, lean winter months. The concept of a dedicated salad with raw, crisp greens was largely absent from the Viking diet. While foragers might have gathered wild greens to eat fresh, cultivated vegetables were almost always cooked, often boiled or stewed. This was partly due to taste preferences, partly for hygiene, and partly because cooking helped break down tough fibers, making the vegetables more digestible. Imagine a Viking looking at a modern salad, utterly bewildered by the idea of eating raw leaves. The flavors themselves were intense, often overwhelmingly so. The pervasive saltiness from cured fish and meats would dominate many dishes. The strong, pungent notes of fermented dairy and fish products would mingle, creating a sensory experience far removed from the subtle nuances of modern cuisine. You'd develop a palate accustomed to bold, often challenging flavors, where delicacy was rare and subtlety almost non-existent. It's like living in a world where every flavor is turned up to 11, all the time. One common historical fact that often goes unappreciated is the Roman influence on some Viking agricultural practices. While the Vikings developed their own hardy strains of crops, some evidence suggests that certain agricultural techniques and even specific plant varieties may have been introduced or refined through contact with Roman and later European cultures during their trading and raiding expeditions. Imagine a Viking returning from a journey, not just with plunder, but with new seeds or ideas about how to cultivate a more resilient crop. It was a slow, gradual exchange, but one that subtly shaped their farming practices. Consider the health implications. The constant consumption of gritty bread led to significant dental wear. The high salt intake, combined with potential deficiencies from a limited variety of fresh produce during winter, likely contributed to various ailments. Foodborne illnesses were a constant threat, and the lack of modern hygiene meant that every meal carried a risk. While the Vikings were robust and active, their diet, for all its practicality, was not without its silent dangers. You'd be strong. Yes, but perhaps also battling chronic digestive issues or the subtle effects of a diet that, while calorically sufficient, might have lacked certain micronutrients. A unique and lesser-known detail about Viking garden crops is the cultivation of certain types of beans and peas. While not as widespread as grains, legumes like broad beans and field peas were grown in some areas, providing a valuable source of protein and fiber. These would be dried for storage and then rehydrated and cooked into thick porridges or stews. Imagine a small patch of land dedicated to these unassuming legumes, their pods holding the promise of vital nutrition. It was a practical addition to their diet, supplementing the protein from meat and fish and providing a hearty, filling component to meals. It's like their version of a protein shake. But you had to grow it yourself. The social stratification of food was also evident, though perhaps less extreme than in the Roman Empire. While the poor subsisted on a more monotonous diet of grains, dried fish, and basic vegetables, the wealthy indulged in grander feasts, showcasing larger quantities of meat, more abundant mead, and perhaps some rare foraged delicacies. But even for the elite, their delicacies often included items like whale blubber or fermented shark, which would certainly raise eyebrows at any modern dinner party. The difference was often in quantity and the effort required to acquire it, not necessarily in a fundamentally different culinary philosophy. It's like the rich having access to a wider variety of slightly less unappetizing food. The role of the garden, or Kolgård cabbage garden, was often tied to the longhouse itself. These small, enclosed plots would be carefully tended, often by the women of the household, providing a crucial supplement to the main agricultural fields. They were a source of fresh greens and herbs during the growing season, and their produce would be harvested and preserved for the winter. Imagine the meticulous care given to these small plots, knowing that their yield could mean the difference between sufficiency and scarcity. The Viking culinary legacy, therefore, is not one of deliciousness in the modern sense, but one of profound resilience, ingenuity, and a deep, practical understanding of their environment. They built a civilization that explored, traded, and conquered, all while subsisting on a diet that was, by our standards, often bland, tough, salty, and sometimes truly gross. They made do with what they had, and they found ways to not only survive but to thrive. Their food tells a story of a pragmatic, unyielding people who prioritized sustenance and efficiency above all else, adapting to every challenge the harsh northern world threw at them. And as you close your eyes, let the images of ancient Viking meals fade away. Think of the harshness of the climate, the resilience of the people, and their ingenuity in turning limited resources into life. There were no supermarkets, no refrigerators, just persistence and primitive preservation methods. You might feel a little grateful for your modern refrigerator, for the variety and safety of food you have at your fingertips. Let that relief lull you to sleep. Tonight, you have traveled through time, and now it is time to return to the comfort and safety of the modern world. Take a deep breath, feel the peace, and let these stories of history gently lull you into your dreams. The seasonality of these cultivated crops meant that the Viking diet fluctuated significantly throughout the year. During the summer and early autumn, fresh cabbage, turnips, and leeks would be available. But as winter approached, the diet would shift almost entirely to preserved root vegetables, dried grains, and cured meats and fish. Imagine the anticipation of the first spring greens, a welcome change after months of monotonous, preserved fare. It was a constant cycle of abundance and scarcity, dictating their culinary rhythm